Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, I'm talking again with Pete Long. So this is our second episode with Pete. If you haven't listened to the first one, I highly recommend it. It's not required for this one, but it is one of my all-time favorite episodes. Pete is the designer of Cozy Rock Cabin. He is also the designer of the original Raven House cabin in Canada, where if you have ever scrolled on Instagram for cabins, you have certainly seen this one. This conversation is a little different than most. Pete, to give you a little bit of context, has very much been a mentor to me in the building of my cabin, but along the way also for my business and for life. Pete is one of the most genuine people I know who is full of integrity. And I find that not only do we have a lot in common, but I really look up to him and respect his perspective on pretty much everything, but especially when it comes to the world of cabins. And so I had lots of great questions planned for this conversation, but admittedly, I was also feeling really overwhelmed the day that we hopped on to chat. And we ended up talking about a lot of that too. I've done a little bit of editing because some of the conversation felt really personal, but I also feel like these are the conversations that Pete and I have regularly and are just honest. And so at the end of the day, I debated not sharing this episode, but I think it's really important. Another thing that I love about Pete is his humility, and both him and I have lots of thoughts and opinions, as anybody does about a lot of things, but we also both know that we don't have all the answers. And so this conversation is very much us grappling with the things that feel bad about cabin culture today, especially when it comes to like Instagram and marketing, but also the necessity of those things and how we've both benefited from it. We talk about our concerns with the scaling of Airbnb businesses and also recognize both of our roles in that. So it is what it is. While editing, I also jumped in and added a couple additional thoughts or context as we go. I've put music under those to make it really clear which were past Janice's conversation with Pete and which are today's Janice's thoughts and observations as I'm editing it. I hope you enjoy. I would love for you all to be part of the conversation. I look forward to hearing what you think. Please feel free to jump into my DMs. And that's all. Let's do it. So welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Back.
I really did listen to our last episode the other day because I was like, I want to build off of the stuff that we talked about. And I thought to myself afterwards, this was one of my favorite episodes. And I find it hard to articulate why. There are a couple that fit into this category, but it feels more mature. Does that make sense? But I feel like I've had a lot of conversations that are like the same conversation. Okay, time to jump in already. This is future Janice or present day Janice reflecting back on month ago Janice's conversation. And when I hear this part, I don't feel like it's totally accurate because I've genuinely enjoyed every conversation that I've had on the podcast. What I've enjoyed most is meeting the people and building the relationships with the humans behind the cabins. The part that has felt repetitive is the story arc. So many cabins have popped up in the last 3 years with very similar stories. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. I am literally one of those cabins. We bought our land during the pandemic. We built during the pandemic. We experienced both the extreme cost increases due to supply shortages, as well as like increased demand in the travel market. Anyway, I am not excluded from this story, but if you look back at the last however many podcasts, a large portion of them have had a similar origin story. And I think that's what I was reflecting on here. And I don't think that has to take away from the quality of the conversations that I've had or the relationships that I've built. It's just something I've noted about the story. And when I say more mature, it is typically from our older guests. And I think it's because I don't think that any of the other ones have been immature. I just like the depth of experience that they've brought to the podcast and how that shapes their own story and their viewpoint on this world. Okay, hopefully I won't do that very often.
Yeah, I know how you feel. I'm just a few years ahead of you.
Yeah.
I know how you feel because you feel like now it's been commodified. That's the part that breaks my heart. But on the flip side, there are now so many other places that more people can go to, but it's just turned into too much of a big Instagram experience, and it's the one-upmanship with design. Everything has to be like so much more interesting than what came before it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it doesn't feed the algorithm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
And
mean,
yeah,
I'm totally part of that. And I think that's part of what I struggle with
yeah,
is
me too.
how to it's why I think the content I like the most is the more like thoughtful, like I don't know, even things like sharing our budget or operating expenses, not our budget, but our operating expenses is more interesting because it gets into like I don't know, it's more interesting to me. The stuff that I don't like but the algorithm loves is just one pretty shot after another. But the algorithm
Yeah,
loves that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then
But
that's what I
anyway,
see. Yeah, anyway. I think I'm excited for this conversation just because I'm feeling a little bit exhausted, but I don't know how to get out of
okay.
it.
As long as it relies, I was going to say, as long as it relies so much on Instagram and the requirements of actual eyeballs seeing what you're going to put out there, you you have to play that game a little bit. And I don't know, just being brutally, bluntly as honest as you can be.
Mhm.
Like when we started renting, I think I said this before in the last podcast. When we started renting, it really quickly became evident that the clarity of the description and how the listing was built was so important to inhibiting the people that probably wouldn't really get it and
Mhm.
have a great time.
Mhm.
People that genuinely do not like bugs. And it got to the point where I said in the listing, listen, if you don't like bugs, if they're going to be agitating to you and make your time shitty, this is not your place. And it wasn't like the vindictive, fuck you. It was
Yeah.
just honestly, and I found that being brutally, clearly honest really ensured that I was talking to the people that I wanted to talk to, that I was pretty sure would get what we were doing and enjoy the experience
Yeah.
as I wanted it to be enjoyed. And that's a little bit selfish. I mean, whatever. Someone can go to a cabin in the woods and do whatever they want, but I built it for a particular reason,
Yeah.
and I wanted to sort of stick to that reason.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know, yeah, the as you've noticed, I don't post much at all ever, and part of that is it's partly an experiment
Hmm.
to see. Well, because like mental health wise, it just was not it was not being a good thing for me, and it was a bit of an experiment to see whether if I just backed away, what did it impact business wise, and B, how did it impact mental health wise, and both have improved.
Really?
Interestingly,
I'm not
oh no, no,
surprised by the
no.
mental health.
Okay, so the mental health, absolutely. Not spending so much time thinking about what's the next post going to be, what am I going to talk about, how do I present this, being concerned about how it looks, letting people in on parts of my life that would need more explanation than I was prepared to give in order to have the picture or video or whatever make
Yeah.
sense to anyone. So I just stopped pretty much. I mean, I post randomly, but the business side really didn't suffer.
So
It's
that's my fear. That's always my fear if I stop posting.
oh, So, stop hosting?
Yeah,
Oh, posting.
stop posting. If I stop
Posting.
posting, the business side is what keeps me on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
The community a little, I will say the community is definitely part of it, but the more followers we've gotten, that's kind of disappeared. We don't hear
Yeah.
from people as much in a positive way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I would be willing to bet that the Airbnb algorithm loves you, and therefore you're always going to show up really strongly in Freeport. So anyone who's looking for
mm,
whatever criteria you're hitting, because you book solid and you feed Airbnb lots of cash, they're going to keep you in the forefront, regardless of. No, sorry, that's in addition to whatever folks come your way by whatever means you direct them there. But the but so and I think part of, like, when I say business didn't, I mean, yes, it's impacted. My website traffic is down, but it's down everywhere on the internet. Like, people, compared to pandemic times, like, that's the problem. Not the problem, but that's one thing to keep in mind for me, and probably also for you, is that the last 3 years were a complete anomaly
yeah,
in a big blip in many different directions.
yeah.
And so, what things look like 2 years ago or even a year ago, it it's ridiculous to think that they would continue on that trajectory. That could not be the case.
Right. And a
But
lot of
anyway,
newer
so
hosts are starting to realize that because we hosted for a
yeah,
while before with our other cabin. I knew when we started booking solid at that cabin, I was like, this is not normal. And so I
yeah,
knew it's returned to normal, which feels fine to me because that's what it was before.
yeah,
I tried to get my uncle on because he's like old school cabin culture, build a cabin, like lived
yeah,
in a
yeah.
teepee. Like I tried so hard to get him to do it when we were up in Maine, just around a campfire. I bought some mics for it. Couldn't get him to do it. He's like, what do I have to
Uh,
talk about? You know what I mean? So kind of that
yeah,
original, like what I've
yeah,
always loved about this world isn't interested in a podcast or Instagram or like, you know?
yeah.
So
Okay, so I'm the
anyway,
old fart. I'm the old fart that
no,
that's what you got.
you're my wise mentor that I go to for like advice on everything. So when I'm feeling like everything cabin related, so or business, when I'm feeling this way, it just felt like okay, it feels like Pete would be a good one to talk to about some of this personally or for the podcast. But I feel like the other piece of this that is on my list for us to chat about is just in addition the pressure that Instagram has created to create more than one. And you know that I felt this because we've talked about building another
Hmm.
one and I've just had such a conscience conscious conscience crisis about
Yeah,
this, about like my role in talking about this and helping others do it. I don't mind helping others build the cabin of their dreams. I love that. I love it. But buying a piece of land and saying I'm going to build 5 cabins for I don't even know that that's bad. I don't know that that's bad. It just feels like
well,
there's this pressure.
because it feels. So on the one hand, it's a viable way to living, make a living, or create a retirement reservoir of equity and cash flow. And again, back to the pandemic, the last 2 years, it everything just went vertical, and lots of folks are jumping on the bandwagon because they saw that vertical, 300% rise in everything, except it can't be sustainable in any respect. And obviously, as time goes on, the ones that lots of people will get in and get out because it's not quite as easy and lucrative as it looked like it was going to be.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I suspect that you and I feel this queasiness about it for the same reasons. And that's, I mean, I'll acknowledge that for me, it's a bit of I feel a bit judgmental in, um, kind of, someone else wants to build a cabin rental empire. And I don't know why that irks me. And some people do it so tastefully and so lovingly that those are the ones I'm like, okay, yeah, it can't be all bad. It's not
That's right.
always all bad.
That's right.
It's
Quick interjection here. If you're listening to this podcast, my guess is you're one of those people. And I think that's one of the things that makes it hard for me to talk about this in the places that I often talk about cabins, is because the people who are part of this community are the ones who, at least from my perspective, seem to be driven by heart and hospitality and motivated by a lot of the same things I am. That said, like, who am I to say what are the right motivations and the wrong motivations? I think that's why this conversation is so tricky for me, but I just want to pop in and acknowledge that if you're listening to this, you're probably one of those people.
it's the ones that are, trying to create the literal hotel-esque experience, that hard juxtaposition between, the super crisp, beautiful spa experience, hotel room without room service, experience, in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of there will be a there's a clash in my head about how much. Why are we in the woods?
Yeah.
And if we're in the woods, like if you wanted, well, oh, okay, I'll go back to and maybe this makes more sense as a way of explaining it. I've always wondered why folks around here, and I think it probably happens everywhere. There are private campgrounds that that Chris and I, actually, last weekend when we were camping, we were driving along the highway and we saw this beautiful sign. It was like West Point Resort. Like, it was really well done. And we thought, oh, what is this Gucci place? So we drove down the dirt road. Anyways, so Lake Point Resort, or whatever it was called, it turned out to be a rebranded trailer park.
Hmm.
And by trailer park, I mean like RV trailers, campers, that fifth wheel campers that people tow behind a truck. Um, but they were so jammed in, like literally, there was like 5 or 6 feet only between each one. I'm like, why? What's the appeal of, like, couldn't you just like stay in town
Right. What's different
with
about this?
what's different about this? The only thing that's different is that uh, it's not your place in town, and your kids can go to the beach
Yeah.
in 10 minutes. That's
Yeah.
about the only thing that's different. And so in my mind, when someone creates a little a super high end cabin resort, and it has to be high end, if you genuinely want to make like lots of money, that's you got to go for people that are willing to spend 5, 6, 7, whatever $100 a night.
Yeah.
But it's it comes back to the question also of, when's a cabin not a cabin anymore?
Yeah.
or,
Which I've
or
asked about
when
my own cabin, even in the
yeah,
process.
I know, it sucks.
And I think some of this comes back to branding, which I hate because it sounds so businessy. But Lauren and Cam of Fort Treehouse, do you know them?
Yeah, yeah,
I love them, just as humans. I feel like they're really good people, and they are building like a treehouse hotel. So they're taking this idea of, we built one and he builds them himself, and now we're expanding it. And they're going through a big rebrand right now, and it's really beautiful to watch from the outside because it is so focused on why. Why go to the
hmm
woods? Why escape? Why separate? And they just seem so crystal clear on why they're doing this. And so when I see their content and follow their adventure, it does not make me feel queasy at all. It makes me
yeah,
feel like I want to experience this. I mean, I want to meet them in real life anyway, but like, and then there's others where it's just one after another without a clear brand. And I would say I can think of one in particular that I'm not going to mention, but
yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. I think.
yeah, and the cabins are beautiful and high end, and they're building a lot of them, and each one is better than the next. And
hmm
and that's beautiful, and I'm sure they make a lot of money, but I have yet to see the why, other than I like building cabins and I like making money. That's just like what it feels like. I don't know much about them. And those are and so I do think it is about, I don't even know if it's about branding. I think branding is just a fancy way of saying, like, do you understand your purpose and your why?
Yeah.
What does that
Yeah.
sound, Pete?
Oh, let me close the door.
Oh,
Hold
no,
on.
it's
That's
totally
my
fine.
neighbor.
I'm just curious.
My neighbor's doing interlock. Hold on.
What is interlock?
Oh, interlock, like pavers.
I still don't know what that is.
Oh, pavings, like concrete modular paving stones,
Oh,
that interlock together. They're Yes, you do know what it is. You've seen it. You've
probably.
seen it. I
Probably.
know you've seen it.
Okay.
Like man-made paving stones, little Lego bricks that
Okay.
interlock together. You lay them on a bed of sand,
So is he building
and
like a
then
driveway?
well, walkway along the side of
Walkway.
his house.
Okay. But
Yeah.
what that sound is not like laying pavers. Is it like,
No, that's the grinder. They're
got
cutting
it?
stones to.
Okay. I was like trying to, at first I was like, are those cicadas? That's kind of what it sounded like. Or like pouring water,
Oh,
but grinding. That makes sense. Yeah. I feel like, and I do think some of that comes from money for people, because a lot of the ones that I see scaling without a clear sense of purpose, to me, there's so much judgment here. I just want to like own that. Like, I don't actually know the inner workings of their business, but it feels like that pressure is financial, because I don't know that they're ever staying in their cabins, are they? Like, it doesn't feel like it.
no, probably no. I don't think so. I mean, but that's you know, people own different types of businesses,
I
and that's just
know.
the business they've chosen to run with. Um,
I know.
but that is so not how I would do it or want to do it, and just wrapping my head around that and being trying to be non-judgmental, um, but at the same time, I'm not interested in being a part of it
Yeah.
in
I
in that hardcore, uh, money is the highest, very, above and beyond every other priority.
yeah. Yeah, and I feel bad judging it, because I do feel like hotel industry, like hospitality has been an industry for years, and that's fine. And so it is
Hmm.
just, if you're viewing it as a business, it is just a business, and that's okay to do that, I think. I think I feel so protective or maybe judgmental because my own lens has never been about this being a business. Now, I will say it's gotten more, it's moved more in that direction now that we have three. How can you not think about it as like,
Yeah.
taxes and all the responsibilities that come with a business? But Sean and I talk about this, and I say that I hate feeling that sense of being judgmental, but really, I just think all of us are taking in what we see in the world around us, applying our own lens to it, thinking critically about it. So judgment is inevitable. And I don't think it's inherently a bad thing if it's helping you figure out your own compass. If I am
Yeah.
paying attention to, like, well, this one makes me feel a little queasy, this one does not, that's information. What information is that giving me about what I need to do? Which I think is why we're moving closer to selling our cabin and Boone and our long-term rental and just paying off our mortgage and saying, you know what, that is financially game changing for our family and takes work off my plate and allows
Hmm.
us to stay closer to just prioritizing the two in Maine that we truly love. One of which makes us zero money and costs us money. The other one can help offset that. And just that feels like it gets me closer to what I always wanted and what the original goal was versus
Yeah.
running a business.
Yeah.
So judgment feels like sometimes it serves a purpose, as long as it's not, for me, as long as it's not shaping my behavior towards other people, and that they can do what they
Right.
want and they're still good people, and that's fine.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. But hey, but you also, it helps define your direction forward, or informs it to, so you go, oh yeah, that's not, I've tried that, don't like that.
Yeah.
Let's do it a little bit differently with that knowledge,
Yeah.
with the wisdom.
Yeah. It does feel a bit inevitable though, because on Instagram and obviously on a podcast, I can't help but voice my own point of view. That is part of just who I am and what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And so when I voice it to an audience of whether that's 5 people or 500 people, then it feels like it's impacting or trying to shape how other people feel about it, which isn't necessarily my goal. It's just I don't know how to stray from what I'm honestly feeling at that moment about all of it.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. Truth, say, speak your truth, and the people that resonates with will keep paying attention, and the rest won't.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other piece of it, I think a little bit is the creative aspect of it. I had so much fun with Cozy Rock, the whole process, the creative aspect, and you get to do that in your full-time job with other people's and creating designs that you just get to create and then, share them with others. Not having that in my day job does leave me like us starting to explore another cabin was really exciting because it entered that creative phase again. That part's hard for me to give
Yeah,
up.
well, then keep following that. It,
Yeah.
who knows where it'll lead? So the yes, there. I have a lot of creative opportunities in my day-to-day job, but at the same time, there's there's so much recycling or uh, recycling echo chamber. Oh, I saw this on Pinterest. I used to, 10 years ago when Pinterest was like not what it is today,
Yeah.
I that was like the sort of up and coming way to get people to put together their boards of, you know, things that they like, things they
Mhm.
don't like.
Mhm.
And it was super valuable as a visual aid for them to understand what triggers them and inspires them, and also then to explain it to me. Anyway, it is very in the cabin design world. It's I feel it's very stagnant. People, they just point to pictures and say, "I want that," or that. I'm like, okay, I've seen that 1,000 times, and I'm really tired of doing that.
Mhm.
Uh, I said to Kristen the other day, we drove past some on our camping trip on the way back. We drove past some new house. I think it was probably a house being built. I was like, oh, I love that. It's, modern, no gabled roof to be seen. And I said, if I don't see another gable roof in my life, I'll die happy. And yet, that's my bread and butter is people that come to me because they love the way I use that particular roof line and combinations of roofs. But I'm so tired of doing the same
Yeah.
thing. It's like, come on, let's try something new.
Yeah.
Um, and same thing with, Instagram. Holy cow, how I would not want to be starting out with a cabin, building building something that you've sourced all your design ideas from Pinterest and Instagram and then built it, and then holy cow, how do you stand out when
That's right.
you can scroll and see, oh, there's so many typical elements that I see now, and I also, part of the reason also that I disengage as much as I can is that if I see it too much, then I start thinking, oh, well, people must like that, and I start trying to bring those things in. I'm like, what the? Oh, that's not original.
Yep.
If I'm, copying, pasting, giving people too much of what they want is actually hard to avoid, and it's like a constant battle, not battle, but it's sometimes difficult to say to people, hey, that looks cool, but I don't think that will look cool in this particular building, and here's why.
Yeah.
Oh, but it looks, look at the picture, it looks so great, I want that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have
and
to.
and well, and I kind of have to.
Yeah. I know. I feel that way
uh,
about video work sometimes. The amount of times I remember when I first started my company, I used to like be like, okay, what am I doing this weekend? And I would just film my weekend and then make like a
yeah,
creative, and it was just for
yeah,
me and it was just a fun way to play. And I filmed
yeah.
everything back then of my own life in like different ways. And every family vacation, I made a film for my family. And I never do that anymore because I spend so much
Uh,
time making films for other people, and we've started doing more corporate work, which is great financially. And also, like, you don't get to be creative. What they tell you they want is exactly
Yeah. Yeah.
what you do, and you just lose that. And so I think that's maybe why the cabin build was so fun for me, because it felt like I was getting a creative outlet of some sort. And honestly, the creative outlet for me during the build was the Instagram, because you were doing the creative designing of the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Jordan was
No,
doing
I
the
know.
interior and Corey was building it. Like, I didn't have much to do with that creativity, but the Instagram creative, how I told that story and how I
Yeah.
created content, like that was the
Yeah.
creative outlet for me, just for me,
That was,
honestly.
yeah.
And I haven't got to do that in a while because I do it for a living now. And so even now, I still enjoy the creating part of Instagram for Cozy Rock for the most part. Week by week, that changes. But because it is the one place that I get to be creative just for me. Although now we're doing some content for Airbnb. And again, it's now taking content creation, which was my fun creative play space. And now I'm doing it for a client.
Turning it out. Yeah.
But isn't it horrible to be so self-aware about this and still falling into it? Like, you would think I would be able to be like, huh, these things don't feel good. Let me stop myself from doing them.
Yeah, but no, but it because where there's no probably no sharp delineation between when it's fun to do, so and when it ceases to be fun to do. It's
Yeah.
not like one day you wake up and go, "Oh fuck, this isn't fun anymore."
Yeah.
Probably,
That's
it's
right.
sort of gradually falls apart
Mm-hmm.
until it becomes just a job. And again, nothing wrong with that, and thank goodness for what that brings.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, no, it's kind of funny how I'm on exactly the same page. I thrive on, well, I did an interview a few years ago with um, Will of Forge Overland. And one of his interview questions, what's your favorite project? And my answer immediately was the next one.
Mm.
My favorite project is always the the one that's sparking my creativity, like, and which is then, at the time it was like just, one fun interesting thing after another, but it's the getting it up and rolling and building it in my head and then getting it on paper and selling the idea and fine tuning, and once it's done I'm like, next.
Yeah.
uh, I'm very much like that, which is a bit of a problem because uh, if I built something that relies on a lot of repeatability, and I'm not like most people. Most people like they like standardization, and I don't like standardization so much. Um, but that's just a reality, I think, of what I've created. That
Yeah.
that people want, that one particular roof line was a hit, and it's going to keep coming back until I simply say no. That's it, and I have to accept that, and I
Yeah.
do. But it doesn't mean I can't try. So Kristen and I have some new projects on the that we're kind of cooking on right now, and they are for us right now, and maybe they will turn into some new business. I don't know. And we're just letting that evolve organically. We're not, I'm keeping an eye on the money potential because that's how my brain works, and
Yeah.
Kristen is just gonna play with. Um, so they
This sounds a
involve
lot like me and
saunas,
Sean. They involve saunas?
yeah, saunas and cold plunging.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Remember when she told me about cold plunging when you guys came to the cabin and she's like, "Where can
yeah,
I go
yeah,
for a cold plunge?" And I was like,
yeah,
"You're crazy. Like, everyone who's doing this cold plunging is just crazy." And now I'm like
yeah,
seriously tempted by it. I've been
yeah,
like trying it in the shower, like with a cold shower, and I last for like 2 seconds.
yeah,
So I'm like nowhere near
yeah.
that. But it is
No,
intriguing, the
I'm,
health benefits.
yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. It's interesting sounding. it sounds miserable,
Yeah.
but the one scenario that I can imagine is going from a sauna into the ice bath
Yep.
when you're already over hot, so that I don't know. In my head, it just sounds more logical than just going cold into a cold ice bath. Sounds just not
Miserable.
fun.
When we were
Miserable.
yeah, when we were kids, we had a hot tub in our backyard, and when it snowed out, our favorite
Oh,
game.
that's the best, right?
Yes, so it's the same idea. We'd like get out and then roll around in the snow or run around the house in the snow and then get back in and
And
your
it,
whole body would like tingle.
yeah, and you don't when you're out in the cold after being preheated, it's not nearly like it's like this really cool
Yeah.
experience because you don't feel the cold as cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we're up to.
I'm excited to hear more about that, especially because we have extra land at Cozy Rock. I've decided I don't want to build another cabin in the immediate future. So we have bandwidth for a project to use some of that space. So we've
I
started
think you
talking more
should.
seriously about a sauna and maybe a cold plunge.
I'm not convinced that that's for everyone, but sauna, I do think that most people would enjoy it. Like if you like a hot tub, it's same but different.
Well, and I've done public saunas only because I don't know anyone with a private sauna. And I don't like it in the sense of like sharing that space with other people. I love the
Mm,
idea of it being on our land in the privacy with just Sean. Like that sounds so fun to me.
right. So you can just 100% be yourself, whatever that moment means. Yeah.
Right. Not even like I mean, it's not even like the sharing of the physical space. It's more like if you want to relax, like I don't want to make small talk with a stranger or endure the awkwardness of not speaking to a stranger while you're in a sauna. Like it's
Right.
more the like the human dynamics that I'm just like, well, this is awkward. Should we become friends? Probably not. We're both here to relax. What do we do in here?
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yeah.
remove that element from it. How are
So
you
that's why you
seeing
make them.
okay, so the other thing that weighs on my mind about the growth of the Airbnb, to your point, I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this, so I might have to like bleep some stuff out. But I had shared with
Yeah.
you about the reality show that was in development that they were
Yeah.
pitching to different networks. When they pitched it to us, it was just a show about short-term rentals. We want someone from different regions of the country. You're the East Coast. Now answer these questions and we're going to put together a reel. And so we answered the questions and we shared honestly about our experience. And then when we saw the reel, it was so fascinating the spin it took that we had no idea. Like they show us the reel that they're going to be
Mm,
pitching and it was titled Overnight Riches. And it was all about,
uh,
yeah. I never told you that?
I didn't hear that title.
That was the title of it. And it was literally like dollar signs on the screen.
Yeah.
And we saw this and we were just like, "Oh, it's a really compelling reel or like reel the way you've done it. I can see how people would want that. Those people are not my people." And I immediately felt uncomfortable with being part of this, even though the things
Hmm.
that we said were actually not about money, but like we didn't have a choice. Then it was just like if they had sold it to someone, it would have been the awkward conversation of I'm not sure this is a good fit. But they came back and said none of the networks wanted to buy it because which I was like secretly kind of excited to hear because I was like, aha, so this is not the spin. I honestly think Cabin Chronicles, meanwhile, is a big hit and nobody ever talks about renting on there. It's all about building a cabin for your family, right? So I
Yeah.
actually found it kind of validating that like my gut instinct was more aligned with like what I think people are wanting. But anyway, the reason they said they didn't want it is because of the bans in New York City on short-term rentals, how short-term rentals are impacting the housing market, which is something I think about a lot. I do not know what that looks like in Canada other than Quebec banning all short-term rentals. I don't know where they stand on it now. What have you seen in terms of this idea of like scaling and growing them, prioritizing money? What does that look like in Canada?
Canadians are, as a rule, a little less, not less capitalistic, but but it's not money on the number one spot with a huge gap between number one and number two.
Yeah.
Like there, I'm aware of, and in Quebec as well, in particular, I'm aware of some really beautiful, I'll use the word wholesome, cabin-ish developments, like on the north shore of St. Lawrence River in the Charlevoix region. There's some beautiful places that are done so well. Like the buildings are beautiful. They've spent a lot of money and a lot of care and attention to you know hit the Instagram algorithm just right with beautiful shots. But the whole focus, it's a very rural region, like it's out in the trees, and that's their focus. It's like outdoors.
Yeah.
You're here, you have a beautiful place to sleep at night, make your own breakfast, and then you go mountain biking. In the winter you go skiing, you go hiking all the year round. The views are crazy. You're out in the trees, you might see a bear and a moose, and
Yeah.
that's their focus. They're not, and they could, like, the places are quite beautiful, and they could very easily push hard on the cabin in the woods, the hotel room in the woods. But they know that if they weren't careful, if they pushed that too hard angle, that they would get too many people, showing up in the Range Rover, getting out in high heels and going, "Ooh, bugs."
What you found.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I like those places in BC as well. On the coast, there are quite a few that have spec. I mean, it's all about the location
Yeah.
and the wildness of the location. Yes, you're in a fantastic, beautifully built place, but I find the focus is less on the place, the building, more on the greater place.
Yeah.
Whereas not always. I mean, the States is full of gorgeous, gorgeous landscape, and but many times scrolling Instagram, you come across, there are a couple in particular that are in beautiful location, but that's not at all. They never even talk about that.
Yeah.
If you look at them on a map, you're like, oh, that seems like a great place. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's some hiking trails there, or whatever. Um, that's not the spin. So they're just responding to, I guess, the market of, that's what people want.
Yeah.
People in Dallas don't give a shit about how many different species of frogs are in that lake. They're just coming for their $2,000 weekend
Yeah.
in
Although,
in this in this Instagrammable place, so they can take a picture and say, "Here I am."
yeah. Which is interesting because
But
Le Terrain and Fort Treehouse are both Canadian. The two that I
yeah,
look at who are doing this as a living, but
yeah,
it doesn't seem driven by money. It seems very much about connecting people to this beautiful space that they love and giving you a place to
yeah,
stay while you're there.
yeah, yeah. There's a little company. Well, little. They're big now. That started up near. Many of their cabins were near us, but more to the west, north of Toronto, and to the west, slightly from us. And their whole business model is micro cabins that are actually on wheels. It's that was initially part of the way to skirt the bylaws about building buildings that are too small to
Yeah.
be called habitable
Yeah.
buildings. So they're not buildings; they're trailers. Anyway, they've made a great business of providing these, but their focus always, always has been, look at how beautiful the place is where you will be. Not, I mean, yes, the little building that you're in, the little cabin that you're in is really stunning, gorgeous, and it photographs well,
Hmm.
but that's not the point. The
Yeah.
point is, the hiking that you're going to do, and the bird watching and paddling the canoe. It's more about the place, less about the space.
Yeah.
I know they make great money, but it's just approached how they've approached or how they've dealt with their messaging in order to get the people that will appreciate what they want to sell. And they don't want to just say whatever is required to get people there,
Yeah.
right? And pay the maximum amount of money. That's not their thing. That's, and I love that about that business. Like they've grown really large, but without getting slimy.
Do you think
And
that by advertising this space, there is the potential to convert people who have not, because I do think some people just didn't. I grew up camping with my family and going to
mhm,
Maine, so I had an appreciation for those things. But I've also met people who didn't grow up that way and wouldn't be drawn to a very rustic place in the woods because they're not familiar with it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
potentially, if you give them a place with a bathroom and a shower that's a bit nicer, and then give them a whole guest book full of trails and outdoor things to do, there's the potential for them to like be won over.
of course, of course. Well, yes, there's a potential for them to be won over, if that's not their mindset, like someone who isn't comfortable being outside because they they grew up in the city, and outside of city limits is just not their experience. They might be uncomfortable. Yes, some of them perhaps will get bold and go on a hike and get bitten by some mosquitoes and experience it hopefully in a positive way. But again, yeah, the possibility exists, but I suspect that the majority of people that go to your place are of a pretty narrow, or any particular place. If it has been described accurately and honestly, they're gonna go because it hits whatever criteria that resonates with them.
Mhm.
So, like Kristen, again, I'm going to use Kristen and I as an example. Like if we were going to rent a cabin in the woods, it's going to be the most rough and tumble rustic place we could possibly find. We have like zero interest in in the hotel experience. I want to like see the bugs. I want to see the mouse. I want to light my own fire. I don't care if the kitchen just is propane, Coleman stove. That's what we really like. We like the down and dirty,
Mhm.
basic shelter over your head because if it storms, you won't get wet. But other
Mhm.
than that, I'm here for the what's outside the door.
So, how did you, and answer this honestly, how did you feel when you were at Cozy Rock?
Um, I honestly conflicted, um, because it is exactly what I put down on paper, and it's not what I would choose.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous, and I love it because it's like a first child. Um, but it's it's not what I would choose. Um, it's too nice,
Yeah. And I felt
and
some of those feelings.
I
Not as
know.
much as you, because I do think I like comfort a little bit more. I can
Yeah,
do rustic, but I still feel a little bit of that. I'm sure
yeah.
not as much as you, but just like it is. I sometimes question if it's a cabin.
It is. It is what it is. It's. I mean, for me, I love it because of the history, and I know exactly where it came from in my mind. And when I did the original Raven House, and we started renting it, like when we, kind of handed it to the first renters for a while, it's like, you know, don't ding the woodwork. I spent so much time making everything like just so, because when I was building it, that's just, what I love doing. I love the super clean, crisp, fine details and spending time making it really nice. But then like having to hand it over and knowing that people are going to use it and not necessarily No, to not like kick their boots off against the wall because they're going to ding the wall, or don't put your coffee cup on like on the windowsill, like don't, or because I don't want to see a ring, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Anyway, it took me a while to like really get over, okay, it's going to get used and that's good. I want the patina. It's like you and your floors,
Yeah.
right? We talked about your pine floors, and the consequences of having soft pine on your floor is that it's going to show wear, and you're like, right on, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool, because that's the kind of thing I would say. It's like, yeah, I like patina
Yeah.
of use, the history, the story. But when you when you start off so pristine and have to keep it pristine for renters, it's kind of a big fat drag, I find.
Yeah.
um, because it eventually the dings are going to start showing up, and you either have to accept them or try to fix them and hide them, or uh, yeah.
And I don't
But
want to
anyway,
fix them or hide them. The other day I was
no,
carrying,
and I know.
yeah.
Yeah, and so for you, like to to be renting it actively, constantly, there's every time you guys go, you're going to see things. I'm sure you do see things like, someone you know bumped whatever against the counter and it's got a dent, or the window frame has got a coffee cup mark, or what, all of the things that happen just from living that you didn't do.
Yeah.
It wasn't you that made that mark.
You don't know the
So you're like,
story.
you don't know the story. There's no story there to reminisce about. And yeah, but I hope that you and Sean can one day stop renting it
Yeah.
and make it just yours.
Yeah. We
I mean,
hope
we
to.
talked about that at the beginning, right? Is that it's, yeah, keep it yours and make it yours one day
Yeah.
completely. And then the stories will be your stories.
Yeah. And I will say I think we do more damage to it than our guests, because I think our guests come and are very careful with it. It's very rare I
Mm.
see anything. Sean's very picky. He'll notice every last thing. I'll see
Yeah.
things and be like, the last time we went, I was like, the floors are finally getting worn in. And he's like, you mean they're getting all scratched up? And I was like, look at them. People are living here. I see dog claw marks. I see, but the biggest ones are all mine. Like I was carrying a dog crate and I accidentally like dropped it and it just dug right into the wood. But my response, if it had been Sean or he'd seen it, I still don't think he knows. He would have been like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "There's a good one."
Yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
exactly where that one came from.
Yeah.
I do hope one day. I mean, we hope to live in it, so one day. But I will say for now, when we can't be up there because our life is down here, I do really enjoy sharing it. I love my favorite use of Instagram, and it doesn't happen nearly enough, is when our guest posts photos or videos from
Mm-hmm.
their stay.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I get to actually see the life that's happening in it while we're not there. And I hate the idea of it sitting empty for long periods of time. I would much rather people be filling it and sharing. I mean, our guest book is this trip. I'll get to take it home with me. And I'm so excited to have one that will be at home that I can read anytime, because that is where when you don't see the stories, some guests we never
Yeah.
hear from. We literally, they never respond to any messages. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And then you read
Yeah.
the guest book and you're like, wow, they had a
Yeah.
whole experience here that I knew nothing about.
And sometimes the honesty is breathtaking, isn't it? Yeah. We've got 3 books, and we treasure them for just, because they some of the stories, that's what made that all
I
worthwhile.
know.
Is, yes, we really helped this person get through some shit, like so many stories like that. Actually, I don't, going to a cabin in the woods, maybe it isn't quite the same now, but for the people that we tended to get more regularly, it was like a self therapy for
Yeah.
them. you know Parents dying, sick
Yep.
kids, going through a divorce,
Yep.
new job, all of,
Yep.
big life events that they needed a bit of a breather
Yeah.
away from whatever it was. And yeah, those are the stories that,
Oh my
man,
gosh, I agree. And the vulnerability, I just am so
yeah,
grateful that people will
yeah,
share this with us and write that in the guest
yeah,
book because it really does give a window into what this space means to other people. It means a lot to us, but it has come to mean something to other people and for them to share the hard things that brought them there.
yeah, yeah,
And that was I mean, if we're being honest, the one really bad guest experience we had, the part of it that was so hard for me is that one, I genuinely care about every guest experience. And so that was just hard that this one didn't go great and it was out of our control. But at the very end of the messaging, she told me that she had a sick parent and is living at home caregiving. And I lived at home for the last 9 weeks of my mom's life and shared caregiving with my dad and know exactly what that does to a human. It pushes you to the
mm,
absolute. I've never been that close to the edge, not of like killing myself, but just where you're like, I don't know if I can survive this. I literally don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And to know that that's where she was at when they happened to be blasting dynamite across the street on a construction site, like that's
Oh,
just,
fuck.
it just
Yeah,
sucks, you know? And I didn't know how bad it was until the last day because she really was a good sport about it for the rest of the week and was like, it's not a big deal. I'm enjoying town. So I didn't know any of this until when things got really, when she wanted all of her money back and was demanding it. And that's when it came up. And I was like, damn, I got that message. And I was just like, give her all her money back, is what I said to Sean. And he was the holdout. And he was like, this is not how something like this. I mean, it got really ugly. She was very unkind to us. But seeing
oh,
that and knowing that that's what she was hoping to get and if any other week of the year, what she could have gotten and
yeah,
how needed it was just heartbreaking for me. I related more to her in that moment than maybe any guest I've ever had, and I couldn't fix it.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, she didn't need the money. I mean, she wanted the money. What she needed was that week. She needed that week
yeah.
away from her family. And I really
Hmm.
deeply believed we could have given her that. And just that week, we couldn't. And that was really, I still think about it because that's just, and the amount of people, you just don't know when they come.
Yeah, yeah. We don't know what the story is.
No, no,
Anyway, so there's a reason to keep going,
I know.
and to keep fine tuning your message, to share those experiences, to bring, I don't know, for whatever it's worth, bring more of those people in,
Yeah.
and discourage the trophy hunters. If you really don't want to host a trophy hunter who just wants to go because it's like, ooh, this is like $100,000 follower cabin. I'm gonna go and take a million Instagram pictures and be happy. Maybe you don't get that. We
I have
got
not
that.
seen a single
Yeah,
guest yet that I have felt that way about. It might be
yeah.
coming, but
We had a little bit of that, but that was at the very beginning before I'd fine tuned how to describe what they're getting into.
yeah.
And after after I revised how I described it, there was only one contingent that had difficulty, and those were folks from France. Because I don't know whether Airbnb does not accurately translate or just what the problem was, but twice we had people from France show up and express dismay that it was not what they were expecting.
Yeah. I love your
But
generosity
anyway,
of spirit that
so
you're assuming it was the translation issue and not the people.
well,
I like that.
um, well, maybe it was a combination, but anyway,
No, I just think I genuinely think that's a beautiful perspective because most people would be like, oh, our French guests were challenging. And instead to be like, huh, there might be, I just think in life we should do more of that. Like step back and be like, was there something else that got in the way that I wasn't thinking about?
yeah, I
And I
mean,
would never have thought of Airbnb translation as being the issue. That would not have been my first response. So,
well, it might not have been my first response, but I'm sure it might have contributed. But
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Well, I will say I'm very excited. We leave next week to go back to the cabin and the thing I'm most excited about is taking that guest book home with me, because literally every time I go, I check it because I want to read the messages, but also I'm terrified of it getting lost.
Oh,
It is the only thing in that
yeah,
cabin
yeah.
that I am worried about going missing. Only thing. You can take anything else in the cabin and we will replace it. But I get terrified. And we had our wedding there and we didn't have a wedding guest book. We just had people sign the cabin guest book.
Oh, so it's all in that as
So
well.
all of our
Ooh,
wedding guests signed it, which
yeah,
I love. I love that they are right in there with every other guest who stayed there, because they were our guests that day.
yeah,
And so I will feel better. Even if the next one gets taken, I don't suspect anyone would take it. It's more just a fear of mine to have at least one of them at home that we can read when I'm having a bad day or feeling stressed out, or, just to
yeah.
know that that one's safe and okay. Um, that will be the highlight of my trip, I think, is finally bringing it home.
Good.
Pete, thank you for your patience with me.
Yeah, no problem.
We didn't even get to some of the questions I had planned. I've been working on this for the last 2 weeks and kept meaning to send it to you, but
Well,
it never felt done. The list of questions, I was like,
you,
this doesn't cover everything.
okay, do you have to go?
I do.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have calls
Okay.
all day today. I have one after, it was just like
Okay.
yesterday. This is why I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I'm still, because we're down to 2 employees, I'm still on half the shoots. I was in Boston last week on a shoot. I'm still on half the edits, still managing half the projects. I also impulsively decided to foster a puppy on Friday, which Sean said
Mm,
no to. So there's a puppy in the other room as well. But damn, is she
okay.
cute.
What kind of dog is it?
I'll show
Just
you.
a mix?
I'll go get her for the last question. I do
Okay.
have one more question I'm going to ask you. Okay, sit right up there. So we don't really know, but she's tiny. Maybe like
Oh,
a Yorkie. She came from a neglect case,
yeah,
so she's certainly a mutt.
yeah,
It was a
yeah.
house full of like 16 dogs who had just been like hoarded.
How so young?
She's so
Just a babe.
little. I know, but
Like,
apparently she might be like a
like
couple
maybe,
months.
yeah, I was gonna say 8 or 10 weeks.
Don't chew on my finger.
Oh, sweet girl.
Isn't she sweet? So I do
Yeah.
not have the bandwidth for it, but and Layla doesn't like other dogs.
Oh,
So it
what are you
wasn't
doing then?
it wasn't my smartest idea, but we have had multiple dogs that don't get along, so I was like, we can do it. Sean said no 3 times, but apparently in his head he's like, if she asks one more time, I can't say no. And I did. So, I mean, she'll get adopted so quick, but it is
Yeah,
certainly making life a little bit more overwhelming. Oh, do you have something to say? Okay, my last question is, we've talked a lot about things that have felt weird or hard or just, I don't know. But what would you like to see as the cabin world, and I don't know if that's Instagram world or Pinterest world or just other world, as it grows, what would you like to see more of?
I would like to see more of projects like Jared and Lydia's.
Hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, building it themselves for their family.
Yeah, lit quite literally building it themselves with their family, for their family. And for everyone that doesn't know, this is a couple in Minnesota, and they've over time, over a couple of years, have built their own cabin with their 2 young girls. And when I say their 2 young girls, we're like in on it, and they're, I don't know, 8 and 10 maybe,
Yeah.
something like that. And I just think I would love to see way more of that, of people taking the time, not not wanting to snap their fingers and have it all done in 6 months and be whatever it's going to be. But leaning into it, putting in the sweat equity, learning the process, enjoying the process. I mean, Lydia's been awesome with her posts of all the good and the bad,
Hmm.
and it's not all roses, that's for sure. But in that vein, um, as interest rates have gone up and money is harder to get and more expensive to come by, I have experienced more and more recently in the last 6 months, folks that are coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to build. We like this design. We want to do this, and we want to build it. We're going to build it ourselves." oh, that's cool, that's great. And what have you built before? Like, what's your kind of feeling about for their experience level? And kind of shockingly, and I sometimes I don't react very well. They say, "Well, I have no experience. I've never built anything." But how hard can it be? I've literally had people say, "How hard can it be?" I'm like, "Wow, I don't even know where to begin." Um, the and I blame that on TV shows and Instagram ish kind of situations where you just see a bunch of curated snapshots of the process of building something or creating something, and it just looks so easy, and people aren't honest sometimes with the not easy
Mm-hmm.
parts. They just conveniently leave all that out. But most fundamentally is when you want to do when you want to try to take on a project like building a building like a cabin, you kind of you have to have some baseline skills. Like you have to have some baseline experience. And I find it so shocking that regularly I have people that self-admit no experience, but that's the plan. Without them sharing with any ideas about how they're going to learn these skills. It's just at some point the reality will hit. I just hope that they haven't like spent a lot of time and money um, getting to
At
that
that
point
point.
before the reality smacks them. They run into that.
How much
Anyway, so
experience did Lydia and Jared have before they started?
they had they had quite a bit of experience doing their own renos in various houses. So they're both nurses, but Jared, I think, participated more in the renovating of different houses that they were in. And by renovating, and whether it was a redoing a bathroom or putting an addition on. But anyway, there were baseline carpentry and project management skills. And by project management, I just mean like knowing the basic steps of how things are need to go.
Keeping track
Uh,
of all the pieces.
Keeping track of all the pieces and knowing when you need to move this chess piece to that part of the board in order to continue on.
Yeah.
So that is why they were successful. But also their attitude is just
Oh my gosh.
fantastic.
I
They
love
just
watching whenever they go up to the cabin.
yeah,
I'm like so engrossed in their stories.
yeah, yeah. So I would love to see more people do it for themselves and by themselves, but as long as they go into it with their eyes wide open.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you don't have the skills. Um, well, not everyone can have everything. You either have to, if you have a little bit of money and a lot of skill, you can make it happen.
Hmm.
If you have a lot of money and a little bit of skill, you can make it happen. But you can't make it happen if you don't have money or the skill.
Yeah. Unless you
And,
have a
and
ton of time and a ton of perseverance.
right, and know that a lot of mistakes are going to get made, and you're going to have to backtrack probably.
Because I feel like Sasha fits into that camp. I don't feel
Oh,
like,
100, yeah, 100%. But Sasha had, he he recognized what he didn't know, and he found people that did know in order to help him out at that stage
yeah,
until he gained that baseline level of understanding of processes and skills and just basic,
yeah,
you know, none of it's complicated, but if you miss a particular uncomplicated step, it could mess up a lot of things down the line.
yeah,
But if you know what you don't know, you don't know. And if you
that's right. I remember when I
yeah.
renovated my first house. I mean, Pete, if you knew me then, I was like 27. I knew nothing about building. I just knew that I was a teacher and couldn't afford to buy an actual house. And so I bought for $65,000 this 100 plus mill house and was like, well, we'll renovate it. And I had a friend named Snooky. He was like a 65-year-old ex-Marine who also was in the Peace Corps, and he went by Snooky and wore a pink hoodie every day. Character. He made it about halfway through the build, but he gave me the confidence that I could do this. And for that, I'll always be grateful. But throughout the process, I conveniently dated people who had skills they could offer. I really didn't do it super intentionally, but I remember when we were doing
it worked out that way.
Yeah, like we were doing the electrical rough-in and I was dating an electrician and I was like, great, can you come over and like help me spend some extra time thinking through this that the actual electrician didn't have the patience for and I didn't have the budget for. It worked out well to have the right people come along at the right moments. And we eventually finished. I ended up being the GC on the end of that, which was just like no experience to do that. But finding the right people and having enough time is definitely helpful if you don't have the skills.
Yeah. You either have the skills and a little bit of money, or you need to be able to pay someone with the skills.
That's right.
And there's no way around it.
Yeah.
Anyway, you got to go, hey?
Yeah, and this little one is going to just jump right off my lap. If you are watching this version on YouTube, you will get to see the adorable puppy who needs a home. So someone needs to adopt her before next week when we leave for Maine. That's our goal. Pete, it was good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.